Welcome to Intellings, your space to explore powerful nonfiction and thought-leading research from across the globe. Our guest today is Paul Larsen, an award-winning author, executive coach, and internationally recognized speaker. He is best known for his best-selling book, Find Your Voice as a Leader, a practical guide that is reshaping how leadership is taught and lived today. With over 30 years in senior leadership at companies like Adobe, Charles Schwab, and Bristol-Myers Squibb, Paul brings a rare depth of experience to the conversation. A member of the Forbes Coaches Council and a sought-after global speaker, Paul is on a mission to help people lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Let us dive into a conversation that could change how you see leadership and maybe even yourself. Larsen, could you briefly define what you mean by finding your voice as a leader and why it is such a crucial concept in today's leadership landscape?
Yeah, so finding your voice as a leader came up for me because what I noticed about leaders was they would go from role to role, let's say in companies, right? And they would take on different roles, or they would have different positions, or they would get promoted, and they really wouldn't think about their new role, and they would just continue to act the same way as they did in the previous role. When you are a leader in life, in any kind of role, you have a unique opportunity to inspire, to motivate, and to really help people find their true purpose, whatever the role is, whatever the environment is. So that's where I came up with the idea to really find your true voice, and that's the voice inside here, as a leader. And that's why it differentiates potentially from other roles we might have in life. Let's say as a friend, as a parent, as a boyfriend, girlfriend, because when you're in a leadership role, it is very unique and your voice should be unique.
Your book emphasizes authenticity. How does one distinguish between genuine leadership authenticity and simply adopting a persona they believe is expected of them?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you're adopting a persona, or you're adopting sort of a model of behavior that is expected of you, then you're always trying to catch up to that behavior. You're always trying to figure out, is this what I should be doing? Is this what I need to do? Is this truly how a leader acts? Versus what you mentioned earlier, which was just being yourself, just finding that voice of who you are and adapting yourself to the different environments that you might find yourself in, not worrying about expectations and or how you should act. That's not easy to do. It's much easier to do on paper than it is in practice, but to just really sort of be comfortable with who you are first, and then your behavior sort of will follow.
You talk about the journey to finding one's voice. What are some of the initial hurdles or common misconceptions leaders face when they begin this process?
Yeah, so, truly finding your voice is finding who you are. It's just listening to sort of who you are as an individual. It doesn't have to take on necessarily a leadership role or anything about that. So if you really think about it, it can be very, very simple. It's about what inspires you, what motivates you, what energizes you. How do you want to serve others in the role of a leader? But we overcomplicate things, as we can do in so much of our lives, because we begin to think about how we should be, or am I that way? Or instead of being really present, we worry about the past, and we worry about our past behavior or our past actions. So it's quite simple just to really think about, how do I want to serve today? That's one of the questions when I work with leaders as a coach. We kind of take out all that extra noise. We kind of like put out all the extra noise and focus on today, focus on right now, and just say, how do I want to serve today as a leader? And what outcomes do I want to have today? Not worrying about yesterday, not worrying about tomorrow, just today. That's where it starts.
Is finding your voice a one-time event, or is it an ongoing evolution throughout a leader's career? How does it adapt to different stages of leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question too. All these questions are really good, actually. It's a journey. It's a journey. So it's not about just finding something and then oh, we have it, we found it. Oh, good. Everything is fine because we have it. It's not about that. It's about, like so much in life, it's about how we evolve as a person, how we grow as a person, how we develop as a person. And so that is what we call it, the journey. And in life, transformation takes place in that journey. That's where the transformation takes place, is through that journey, and not when we get there. So an example of that is, let's say you are in a career and you're and you get promoted to a leadership role, a manager role. Your transformation is not going to happen when you get that role. It's going to happen in the journey of how you develop yourself in order to succeed in that role. So that's why finding your voice, I'm of an age that is decades and decades and decades older than folks, and I'm still finding my voice. I still evolve. I still develop. I still grow. I still learn. I still make mistakes. I still have successes, but it's all part of the transformation.
How does it adapt to different stages of leadership? Could you share a specific anecdote or a composite example from your experience where a leader truly transformed after finding their voice? What were the key turning points for them?
So in order for, if you don't mind, I'm going to use the example of myself. So in order for a leader to really, truly, quote unquote, transform, you have to be available and you have to be approachable. And for me, I had 30 plus years in the corporate world. I had lots of wonderful jobs. I had great successes. I had some abysmal failures too. I got promotions. I got fired. I had like everything happen to me in my story, in my business world. And then I found myself one day sitting in a church, of all places, and listening to people talk about my father. And it was at his memorial service, right? So he was a very blessed man, and he had an incredible life and an incredible person. And they're talking about what a wonderful man he was and what he meant to them and all these wonderful things. And it was like one person was grabbing the microphone from someone else to talk about, my father. And I listened to it and I wasn't surprised because I knew my father to be that way. But then this is where sort of the transformation happened that you asked about. I started thinking about, what are they going to say about me when I transition? When I go to that big office in the sky, what are they going to say about Paul that is part of his brand, is part of his legacy? How did he inspire people? Did he make a difference? And literally, I sat there in that church listening to these beautiful people talk, and it just transformed me to say, oh my God, I have no idea what they're going to say about me. I have no idea if I'm doing the work I'm supposed to do. I have no idea if I'm inspiring the way I'm supposed to inspire, because I was just kind of going through the motions. I was actually behaving in a lot of ways that was expected of me, like you asked earlier. So I sat there, and it just all of a sudden kind of flooded into me, all of this realization that I wasn't doing all the work that I could be doing, that I really wasn't finding out who I was. I didn't know anything about finding your voice in that moment, but I knew I had to find something. Otherwise, I was just going to continue like this, and that would be okay. I'd make money. I'd have a job. I'd be successful. On paper, it looked good on the resume, but it wasn't truly what I really wanted to leave in terms of my imprint, in terms of my legacy. So that example of sitting there and listening, and that's the key word, listening. And I was listening to what was going on around me, and then I was listening to myself in terms of how I was responding. Now, It doesn't always take something like a memorial service or something like that in order for us to hear what really we need to hear. But it was in that moment that I decided I needed to do something different with my life in order to fulfill what I was supposed to do, in order to fulfill who I was, and in order to help others. And that was a truly transformative moment. And that's why I ended up a couple of years later writing the book, because it was a book about finding your voice, and that's what I went through.
For leaders who feel naturally introverted or less comfortable in the spotlight, what specific advice does your book offer to help them discover and project their unique leadership voice?
Yeah, that's a great, very good question. I'm an introvert. And I love to be by myself, and I love to do things kind of solo. But I realize we live in not just an introverted, but we live in a very extroverted world. Most companies that I've worked at, most people that I work with, tend to be more extroverted. But it doesn't mean I have to change who I am. So some of the advice and guidance I give to introverts is we have an innate ability to listen and to observe. We don't have to be the person in the room that always says something. We don't always have to be the person in the room that always has to, me, pick me. We don't have to be the person in the room that is at the forefront and standing up and saying, look at me, because we have an innate capability to listen, to observe, and to process that. And in today's world, where there is so much noise in today's world, having that ability to just kind of sit and watch and listen and then say something that could be very deliberate, very purposeful, and sometimes very, very, very inspiring is an ability that not everybody has. So I've learned as an introvert to utilize that in such a way that it's an incredible skill. And remember, it's not about it's good to be an introvert, it's good to be an extrovert, it's bad to be an introvert, it's bad to be an extrovert. None of that. It's who we are. And it doesn't mean we don't like people as introverts. Sometimes the misconception is, oh, you don't seem like an introvert, Paul. You seem like you like people. Has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with where we get our energy from. So in many times I speak at conferences, or I do workshops, or I'm with people in coaching circles. And then after that, I go back to my home or go back to the hotel and I'm by myself, because that's how I replenish my energy. It has nothing to do with liking people or being around people. It's where we get our energy from. And that's a really important thing to remember between introverts and extroverts.
The book likely provides actionable steps. Could you highlight one or two practical exercises or strategies readers can implement immediately to start this journey?
Yeah, so one of the exercises I utilize quite a bit, and I've done this with myself, and I still do, is what I call the leader framework and the manager framework. So how do we think like a leader, and how do we think like a manager? So managers tend to follow sort of all the rules. Managers tend to follow all the process. Managers kind of tend to follow sort of the checklist, so to speak. That's all good. But leaders do not just that, but they bring out a vision. They engage people. They enroll people. Managers are worried about who's on the organizational chart. Okay, who have I got here? Who reports to me? They have to follow me. They have to go by my rules. Leaders are like, I don't care about that. I care about enrolling everybody into my vision and my strategy. And I call it the art and the science. So managers will follow the science, and that's good. And managers will be successful, and they may get promoted, and they'll do a good job. But leaders not only do that, leaders take that science and create an art form. They create a beautiful work of art, like what's behind me here. All these colors, all this vibrancy, all this growth. So it's getting out of that, what we call fixed mindset, which can be very narrow, and going into a growth mindset. So the exercise is simple as this. When are you a manager? What are you doing today that is following sort of the manager? And then what do you want to do today that will follow much more of the leadership role? And when I do that with folks, or when people do that on their own, they find themselves many times, not all the time, but many times, the manager list is like this, and the leader list is like this. And what you want to do is you want to have a manager list that is pretty equitable to the leader list, right? So that's one thing. The second exercise is a very short one, and that's called a thought diary. And that means we can process up to 60,000 thoughts per day as an adult. This is from the National Science Foundation. They actually studied this. So think of all these thoughts that we have coming in here. These thoughts create our feelings. Feelings create our decisions and our actions, which then create our life. So what I do with many leaders, because I hear leaders talk about things that are going up inside their head. I'm not good enough. I wish I was this. I don't belong here. They have all these thoughts in here. So I have them take 5 minutes, which doesn't seem like a long time, and write down every thought that comes into their mind. Just every thought. And what we do is we go back and we look at those thoughts, and we project and we look at the themes in those thoughts. And many times, the thoughts that we're looking at that they had in those 5 minutes are coming from the day before. They're like coming from the past. And many of them are also catastrophizing the future. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. Oh my God, what if this happens? They're not thinking of what I said earlier, the present. So I want everyone to get into the present mindset. Let go of the past. The future is not here yet. Focus on the present. So that exercise alone can be very, very enlightening when you jot down all the thoughts that you've had in your thought diary for about 5 minutes.
How does a leader's voice influence team dynamics and organizational culture? Can a leader's authentic voice inadvertently create friction or resistance?
Sure. Whatever the leader's brand is, whatever the leader's legacy is, whatever the leader's behavior is, i.e., whatever the leader's voice is, can influence everybody around them. Can influence one person, can influence a team, can influence the whole organization. So many times when I work with leaders and they're looking at their organization, they're like, how come I have a culture like this? I want a culture that is positive, Paul. I want a culture that is inspirational. I want a culture of people that can do things. Well, sometimes we can trace some of that right back to that leader. And if that leader is not modeling that behavior, that leader is not modeling those actions and those thoughts, the culture and the team is going to align to that leader. So it goes back to what we talked about. Everything a leader does is somewhat under a microscope. And the team is watching that leader and they're like, well, what's he like today? What's he like yesterday? What's he going to do today? Do I do this? Do I do that? They're worried about that instead of worried about how they are, how productive they are, what's their potential. They're worried about the command and control of a leader versus worrying about their own potential. So absolutely, I don't want to scare leaders to say that everything you say and everything you do is being watched by people. But if you think about it, it kind of is. When we look at today's world, all we see on TV, all we see in our streaming, in our media. TV takes me back to many years ago. That used to be something we watched, by the way. That shows you my age. But everything we stream, whether it be our digital tech, our social tech, it's all about leaders around the world and how they are. And people are trying to guess what they're going to do. And why did they do this? And what are they going to do next? Well, we do that in organizations all the time. So a leader has a direct influence on the culture. And again, it can be very simple. When a leader wants to change a culture or transform a culture, it starts with them. It starts with who they are and how they behave.
In a world increasingly focused on diversity and inclusion, how does finding your voice as a leader intersect with the need to amplify the voices of others within an organization?
Yeah, it's a great, I love that. We tend to create, in our world, and I'm speaking from also the United States where I live, we tend to create lovely programs or labels. And then we get rid of those. We don't like them anymore. Like the label becomes something like we don't even want to talk about. It's like, so diversity, equity, and inclusion is like, it's a beautiful substance. It's a beautiful model. Then all of a sudden it's like, it's not. It's like, you can't have that. So I don't like to worry about labels. I don't like to worry about what we call something. I used to head up HR. I used to be a chief human resource officer. And we used to have labels for everything. We had, affirmative action and diversity programs and da-da-da-da. And it's like, I don't care about the labels. I want to look at the behavior and I want to look at the outcomes that we want for our culture and that we want our leaders to exemplify, right? So finding your voice is, if you think about it, it's about all the different voices we have in the world, all the different voices we have that can be so beautiful. My life is blessed now, and I do a lot of work in the Philippines. I do a lot of work in Singapore. I do a lot of work in Malaysia. I do a lot of work in Thailand, besides the United States. And I look at all those incredible voices in all those incredible geographies. And within them, there's a whole variety. They're not all the same within those countries, just like they're not in the States. And it's not about we have to agree with all the voices, but we can learn to accept that we've got all of these diverse voices, different voices that are saying something. So I recognize that when again, for myself, why I do that work in Southeast Asia specifically is because it puts me in these beautiful communities where I learn so much about myself while learning and helping all of these folks that have all different voices, and those certainly intersect as it pertains to the different voices, i.e. the diversity, and how to be much more inclusionary. And it doesn't have to have a huge label. It doesn't have to mean something where it's like, no more DEI. It doesn't matter what you call it. What you're looking for is the outcome of, how do I use to everybody's voice? How do I use everybody's behavior to the most maximum potential so that everybody is heard? And that's the key for me. And that's what the voice model allows in terms of that.
What role does feedback, both positive and constructive, play in the process of refining and strengthening one's leadership voice?
Yeah, that's a great, it's another word, feedback, that comes. It can be very, feedback can be very provoking. People hear feedback and they're like, I don't, about something that we might have done in the past or something we're going to do in the future. But it's just information. It's kind of like R&D on yourself. So it actually can be very, very, very helpful. But what we've done with feedback, at least in the business world, is we have layered upon layered upon layered all of this emotion to it. Like, oh, I have to ask for feedback. Oh, what's the feedback going to be? Oh, I don't know if I can accept feedback. I don't know what to do with feedback. It becomes this kind of gargantuan monster, when in fact, all you're asking is, hey, what could I have done differently? And or what could I do more of or less of? I learned this early on as part of a performance improvement. So the performance would be me. And I would say, what is one thing I could do differently? What is one thing you'd like me to stop to do? What is one thing you'd love me to start doing? And what is one thing you want me to continue to do? So those three questions, start, stop, continue, that's part of a performance improvement model. I put it on myself. And I have leaders just ask that of people, just like, what is one thing I could stop doing? What is one thing I could start doing? And what is one thing I could continue to do? When you give people a script to help you, they will usually come up with something that can be very, very helpful to you. Versus, can you give me some feedback on me? Can you give me some feedback on my leadership skills? It's like, no, just ask very pointed and specific questions that are very short and to the point. And more than likely, you will get the information you need. You don't have to agree with it, but you just accept it and you thank them and you move on. Yeah.
Your book is titled Find Your Voice as a Leader. Is there a distinction between finding your personal voice and your leadership voice? or are they inextricably linked?
Yeah, I like to think they're linked. It's just kind of finding your voice, kind of what we started talking about early on here. I use the voice acronym or the word voice about how I kind of found my voice, which was discovering my values. That's the V. So what's important to me in life, right? What outcomes do I want in my life? Outcomes or vision, that's the O. How do I influence those outcomes? So it's not about just how do I get those outcomes, but how do I influence them so I can be successful in that? That's the I. The C is very important. What courageous steps do I need to take out of my comfort zone to influence those outcomes aligned to my values? So you can see how they're all they're all linked. And lastly, the E is, what is my overall expression, brand, legacy that is linked to my courage, how I influence, how I get my outcomes, and all of a sudden come and is certainly linked to the core, which is my values. Because our values are how we operate. Our values are who we are. So when I look at that voice model, it can be for leadership, it could be for life, it could be for parents, it could be for students, it could be for relationships. The model works across the board. And when I coach folks, we're looking at the situation that they might be in around them.
How does the concept of finding your voice apply to leaders in non-traditional or less hierarchical organizational structures?
Yeah, I designed the model, again, the voice model, to be fluid. So as a leader, I look for flow. I look for like when things are kind of flowing, when I'm in the flow, when I'm inspired, when I feel good, versus friction, conflict. And we can have that in life. That's all part of life. But many times leaders will always have a lot of friction. And where does that start? It starts in here. If a leader is conflicted with themselves in any kind of role, whether it be a non-traditional role, whether it be a lateral role, whether it be the traditional career ladder, it doesn't matter. The model works in any kind of traditional or non-traditional leadership role, because what you're doing is, it's not just leadership per se, it's really finding that voice of a leader from within. So it's really finding your true voice of how you are. And when you discover your values and you establish the vision or outcomes you want and the influence and the courage and then your overall expression, you have discovered so much about yourself that you can be fulfilled, you can be content, and more importantly, you can be confident in any role that you're in. So I work, just FYI, I work a lot with imposter syndrome, which is not feeling good enough and feeling like a fake. And it's kind of like, it's feeling like, you've got like a mask on, right? And you're not yourself. And I've lived with that my whole life. I've just lived with that my whole life. And finding my voice, following my model, walking my talk, so to speak, has helped me to kind of like, wow, I get to love myself. I get to like feeling good about myself and not joking about it like I am right now a little bit, but really truly like understanding, wow, this is who I am. I have discovered these things about myself. That has given me the confidence and the self-assurance to be able to lead in all these different environments. It doesn't mean I still don't have doubts. It doesn't mean that I don't sometimes walk into a room and start looking around like, what am I doing here? I'm not good enough. I still have that. I'm human around that. I'm absolutely human. But then when I have that voice up here, because of the work I've done with my voice down here, I'm able to say, oh, okay, thanks for that. That's just my imposter voice speaking. But I feel very confident in who I am. And when my imposter voice speaks up here, it means I'm doing something new. And I take that as like, wow, this is great. So I look at that as like something that is more of a superpower now than something that should be avoided.
In the age of artificial intelligence and increasing automation, Why is a distinctly human and authentic leadership voice more critical than ever?
Oh, you kind of answered your own question there, right? That was a beautiful question, and you kind of answered it, And I was watching this person on one of the either LinkedIn or Facebook or one of them, and they were talking about A1. They kept saying about A1, and I was like, no, it's AI. It's AI. It's like even before AI, which is now everywhere and is absolutely incredible, but it's artificial intelligence. Keyword, artificial intelligence. So it can do so much, and we haven't even touched all the potential of what it has. But when something is artificial, we need to be able to bring our authentic voice to that. So I've spoken at a few conferences of late that have been kind of AI conferences, right? And they get into the technical aspects of AI and they go down deep. And as a speaker, I talk about what do you need to do as a leader in the future and now to bring your authentic voice and what I call your AI, which is your authentic inspiration, to any program, to any organization, to any potential model that you are going to be working with. People are so afraid of AI's taking over. I'm going to lose my job, blah, 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 blah. Sure, it's going to make difference. Sure, it's going to change things. Sure, it's going to, just like everything has. And you can run away from that. I remember when people were running away from the internet. The internet's just a fad. Yeah, right. AI, embrace it, engage with it, and find your authentic inspiration about how you can work with that, and it can be an addendum to you. It's not something to avoid, it's something to bring in. So I look at it as part of life for me is being curious. And true leaders in life are curious, creative, and courageous. So the 3 C's. You notice I work in lots of different models. I make everything up with lots of different things for myself to kind of remember. But if you really think about it, so instead of running away from AI, be curious about it and try to figure out how can I make this work for me using my authentic voice, my authentic inspiration versus avoiding it, which is what sometimes leaders will do when they don't like something, right? But don't do that. Embrace it and engage with it.
What common mistakes do leaders make that prevent them from truly finding and utilizing their authentic voice?
The biggest mistake is remaining in a fixed mindset, remaining in this area of no growth. So being fearful. And that comes from fear of change, fear of losing control. We see a lot of leaders in today's world afraid of losing control of whatever it is they control. And they're afraid of that. So what do? They double down more on control. They double down more on command. And instead of reaching out to more people, they actually don't do that, and they reach in and go down even further. So they remain very fixed, they remain very fearful, they remain very command-oriented. They will direct people what to do. They won't ask about anybody. They won't ask about what they could do. They won't ask for feedback. So they're in this like incredible narrow model of themselves versus opening themselves up like these beautiful colors behind me on this picture, on this incredible work of art, and being a little bit this and a little bit that and trying this and trying that and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. They would never want to make mistakes, right? So that's what life's about. Life is about going out there and finding who you are. But while we do that, we're going to make some mistakes. But that's all part of the journey, because the journey is the transformation, as I said earlier. But the leaders who are fearful, the leaders who stay like this, the leaders who won't listen, they're the leaders who don't want to go on the journey. They want to just get there. And if they're not there, they're going to make themselves be there beforehand, and they're just going to double down on that. And you'll see that in how they lead, and you'll see that in how they manage. And those are not true leaders because they're not really following any sort of leadership model. They're just being fearful, they're just being command oriented, and they're being incredibly controlling. And everyone around them is fearful and controlling. And they don't create what we call psychological safety. They don't create a safe environment in which to grow, in which to lead, and in which to exist.
Looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest challenge or opportunity for leaders in the next 5 to 10 years concerning their ability to effectively communicate and lead with their unique voice?
Yeah, I think in whether it be 5 to 10 years, that's like, wow. We used to think in 5 to 10 years increments. Now we're like, what about 1 year, right? Because things can change so much now in just a short period of time. It really is about being incredibly purposeful with what you communicate. And when I say that, when I work with leaders, including myself, I want them to really think about what is the purpose of what you're communicating. So think about the purpose and what is the outcome you want. What is the outcome you want for your audience, whether it be an audience of one or an audience of hundreds? And what is the outcome you want for yourself? So many times leaders just throw and vomit everything out there. Excuse my verb, but that's what they do. They just communicate everything out there. And they're not even thinking of what they're communicating. They're just throwing stuff out. And in today's world, there is so much information that we have that we can communicate, that leaders have lost the art sometimes of communicating in a very purposeful and a very deliberate manner. And that goes back to what you talked about, earlier about being an introvert. Because as introverts, we don't always speak up, but when we do speak up, we can be very purposeful and we can be very deliberate. And I like to bring that capability, that skill, that model to all the leaders that I work with. That to me is going to be probably a challenge, because as we go forward and as we have every conceivable application and tool available to us to communicate and give us information, we have to learn to be even more deliberate.
What inspired you to write Find Your Voice as a Leader at this particular time? Was there a specific catalyst or observation that prompted its creation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I mentioned, I went through the transition with my father, and when that occurred, I had a wonderful, beautiful job at Adobe Technology. It was a great company, and I took the steps necessary then to go out on my own, and I became kind of a coach, an executive leadership coach, and so forth. And about 2 years after that, I was with one of my clients at a large organization. And this was an engineering leader at this large organization. And we were having a discussion one day about his communication, kind of what you were just asking about, and just about sort of how to be more purposeful, how to have more presence, how to be more deliberate. And we were going through some ideas about what this leader could do to kind of improve that. And we paused for a moment, and he looked at me and he says, "You know what, Paul? You are the Find Your Voice guy." And I was like, "What?" Like, like, "Whoa, I like that. What does that mean?" He goes, "You help us find our voice in here. You help us give voice to who we are as a leader." Well, I was like, what more beautiful gift can I get than to have somebody I work with tell me who I am, right? And I said, find your voice. Find your voice. That was the catalyst. When he said that to me, it was just like everything just sort of like the lights went on, the music, the song, everybody was like, wow. And I ran with it. And I, it was a beautiful gift from him. And then I took the voice, and that's when I took the voice and made it into a beautiful model. And then that was my catalyst for writing the book. So it all just, he gave name to what I do. He gave me a name to all that I do. And then I took all of that and ran with it and created the book, the brand, and more importantly, helping people like myself find our true voices.
As an author and leadership expert, have you personally had moments where you have had to reevaluate or rediscover your own leadership voice?
Every day. Yeah. If you're not really reevaluating, reassessing, looking at who you are, and more importantly, how you could become more of who you are to yourself and to others, then you're not growing. So if I didn't do that, what you asked, reassessing, reevaluating, all of those things, if I did not do that, I would be the leader that we talked about earlier, the leader who never changes, the leader who lives in a fixed mindset, the leader who who is fearful of change. That's what I would become. Because as humans, we can fluctuate between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And I'm always going to be continually growing. So even though I grow and let's just say I mature as a person and I age as a person, I want to continue to blossom. And in order for me to do that, I have to continually evaluate who I am, how I say it, what I do. And what I want to do is always put myself in situations that make me grow, where I haven't figured everything else out. So I borrow the philosophy of always saying yes to things. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll try it, I'll do it. Say yes. And if I don't quite know what to do, I don't fake it till I make it. I face it till I make it. And that's what I like to think about is I'm going to continue to face things until I make it, until I grow into it. And that's all about how we just grow as people.
If readers take away only one key message from Find Your Voice as a Leader, what do you hope that message would be?
You are unique. You are special. You have a unique voice that nobody else has. It doesn't matter how many people there are in the world. It doesn't matter where you are, where you work, the relationships you have. You are unique. And by going through that voice model, by understanding your values and your vision and your influence and your courage and that expression of who you are creating a legacy in this world that is unique to you on how you serve yourself and how you serve others. There is no such thing as a cookie cutter approach to who we are. We are all so unique and so different. And I want people to celebrate that. Don't worry about labels. Don't worry about all DEI, diversity, all that. You are unique in itself, and to own that and to embrace that.
Beyond the concepts in your book, what is one piece of advice you would offer to an aspiring leader who is just starting their journey in a leadership role?
Yeah, one of my, that's a great, I love that question too, as kind of a closing question. I work with a lot of aspiring leaders, in the U.S. and certainly in the other countries that I talked about, in the regions I talked about. And I just love that. And I love the questions that come up. I love that curiosity. So the one piece I always have for people is be yourself, be unique, and be curious. It is so easy when you are a new leader, when you are an aspiring leader, to try to be like someone else. I want to be like her. I want to be like him. I want to be like this person. No, you want to be who you are. Now, you might grab parts of those people, right? And you might like what they do. So you can kind of create a little robot model of who you are. But you want to be unique to who you are. You don't want to be a shadow of somebody else. You want to bring yourself into that. So it's be unique and be curious, because that's what's going to matter. So aspiring leaders can sometimes get caught in trying to be like someone else, who they might model or who they might want to be mentored by, or who they just aspire to be. That's wonderful in itself, but be unique and be curious, because that's really what matters. And thinking about listening to all the voices we have in the world, the one thing I like to say is our job as leaders is not to change the world. Our job as leaders is to change ourselves little by little, step by step, so our world will change. And that's the most beauty of really becoming a true leader, is that you're continuing to grow, you're continuing to be unique, and you're continuing all along to serve others.
And that wraps up our inspiring conversation with Paul Larsen, a remarkable leadership coach and the author of Find Your Voice as a Leader. Stay tuned for our next interview with another thought-provoking author. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an episode.